Start recording right now. Wow. How did you get into coaching? And then furthermore, how did you get into coaching coaches?
I could say good questions to both. We always respond to both like that. So they are good questions. So myself, in terms of coaching, I was pretty much at it right out of the gate, in the sense that I went to university and did a sports studies degree back in the UK. And I did a placement at a local government kind of organization that it was like a sport development kind of placement, but there was some coaching involved where I was representing the company at events and things like that. And then they found out that I was involved in coaching. So they gave me like a scholarship where they said, we'll pay for you to do a coaching class if you come down and coach with us. The place where it was a bit of a hop, skip, and a jump to get there. It was like a train ride, some walking, and a couple of buses to get to where I was going to be coaching. But I felt as though it was worth it. So that was how I kind of got into formal coaching. And the program was called Champion Coaching, and you got a sweatshirt and whatever. And to a young undergraduate at the time, 30 years ago, it was quite a good opportunity. And I just wanted to be around the kids because, as we all say, we can give something back. But what I would say is, prior to that, I was already into coaching because I would go to a community center after school on a weekday, and me and my mum would go, is my English, mum rather than mom. She and I would go, and I would, air quote, train or coach her with some badminton skills, because she felt as though I was someone that she could learn some things from, I guess. And so that was really an informal way of me getting into coaching, by working with my mum. The other thing I would say that was an informal thing was I was probably, not really probably, I was a self-coached athlete, to my detriment, really, because my parents didn't really have a lot of money. And so to get the private coaching that I needed, it was quite expensive. So what I would do is I would, you've heard the story of the person that went on YouTube and coached themselves how to throw the javelin. It was a bit like that, but we didn't have YouTube. So I would go to tournaments and I would watch what players were doing. I would then come back. I'd go to, friends who I'd play sport with, and this was particularly badminton. I'd work on things. I would go to club nights and find a spare court and do movements on my own. I would go with my parents or to their sessions, and we'd steal 5 minutes of court time. We'd go there early, we'd stay a bit later, all the things that we see. And you would probably say, well, why didn't you become an exceptional athlete with all this? And I don't know the answer to that question. But that's the type of thing that I would do. And I'm specifically talking about badminton, but I would probably do that with the team sports that I played. And at the time it was more field hockey. So self-coaching, the champion coaching scheme was when I got into coaching. And then the third part of the question, I guess, is how I got into educating coaches. That was really when I started thinking about doing a PhD. So I worked at a community college back in England, and then I came to the States to do a PhD, and it was in physical education, teacher education. So really it was a matter of me stepping up from being a phys ed teacher and a community college teacher to then becoming, a doctoral student with the view to becoming a professor. And to do that, you needed to understand and study teaching and learning and look at that. We call it physical education pedagogy, or it's physical education and sport coaching pedagogy. So I started getting into that at the university when I was teaching, and I did classes in sports psychology and a minor in that. I did statistics classes, which have got nothing to do with coaching. But then I started getting interested in how I would work with coaches and study coaching from a academic perspective. So that's how I kind of got into that, and felt always, it's a bit like the fish thing. Why am I in a school or in a club coaching when I can be also going and helping other coaches. It's the teacher person to fish. So I'm not just fishing myself, but I'm teaching other people to fish. So that's kind of a little bit about all those things.
And what's really fun is that physical education teacher education that you got from WVU, I was actually there at the same time getting my undergrad.
Wow. Well, I was a professor there. I got my PhD from Oregon State, but then I went back to England and then came, yes, to WVU, and I was a professor there in physical education, teacher
Yeah,
education.
I
Yeah.
was in the College of Physical Activity and Sports Sciences getting a sports psychology bachelor's degree at the time. So I'm sure that we ran into each other in the hallway at some point. That's fun.
We probably did, but you had some good people there to work with, so that's
I really
very
did.
fortunate. Yeah.
But back to you, why field hockey?
Um. Well, I was playing soccer to start out with, and that was kind of my go-to sport, really. And then my parents started playing badminton, but my brother started playing field hockey, and so I got an interest in it, and I played for the school team, and then I went to start playing in like community college and at a local club. And, I was quite small really for my age. And in the UK at the time, or in England at the time, this game of soccer was less technical and tactical than it is probably now. And it was more physical. And, the what we knew about selection criteria and the relative age effect wasn't there. So it was basically, we take all the big kids and the little kids who we just get rid of them. And so it was like soccer was a bit of a donor sport to field hockey, and so I went to play field hockey, where really, yeah, it's still a contact sport and whatever, but some of the technical attributes that you had were a little bit more welcomed and things like that. And I guess, to some extent, I transferred the skills that I had from the cognitive kind of side of playing, where to be in terms of spacing, positioning, different movements, and just had to pick up some of the technical aspects. And obviously I saw that as a bit of a challenge, but playing badminton, it was quite good because the hand-eye coordination was there. So it was something that I picked up quite quickly, and I was able to get into.
So when you were talking about your mom asking you to coach her, do you think that she saw in you, I mean, what do you think she saw in you that pinpointed you as someone who could coach her?
Well, we say in our field there are three knowledges you need, I guess: knowledge of your students, or knowledge of the people that you're going to coach, the knowledge of the content, and the knowledge of then the how to teach. So those three things are kind of going around all the time, but they, you can think about them in a triangle or a Venn diagram where the three circles and they overlap. But sometimes one thing will take over from the others. So there's that kind of part of the theoretical aspect. So, but I think a lot of people with coaches think about content first. So it was probably that she saw, oh, this person, as in my son, can play to a decent level, and we take it from there. Me and my mother would play on the same team because I started playing for her club as well eventually, and we would play mixed doubles games together in like match play. And I believe that this is then the knowing the person. It was as we were playing, I was kind of going, well, I need you here, I need you here. And she was saying, well, you need to cover that. And, so we had that kind of relationship. I mean, I played some men's doubles games with my dad as well. And so we always had quite that type of relationship as I guess, as a family unit where we would go and participate together. And, they were mentoring me in a way, and I was helping them. So I was doing more of the content kind of side of things, but they would kind of help me out, get more experience in playing the game. And, we always struggle with the transition when we're young players, because you have to manage the transition between being like a junior athlete and then playing in the senior game. So playing club with adults was a way to help with that transition. But I would probably say it's the content thing, really, that she would see.
Do you think that good coaches have to be good leaders?
There's a leadership component. So I do work with US Soccer at the moment as I'm training to be one of their coach educators, coach developers. And we use the term we. So we at US Soccer, one of the 6 tasks of the coach is leading the player, and another one is leading the team. So for sure, in those 2 aspects, one does need to be a leader of people. And as you are more than aware, with your background in sports psychology, there are different types of leaders, I guess. So there are leaders by example, where you try and model the behaviors, and some leaders do more of that and try and totally lead by example, whereas others are a little bit more, democratic with their leadership behaviors. And so I think that when you're leading the team, being a role model is obviously important, but there are other facets to being a leader that I guess are important too. And sometimes it's knowing when to ask and when to tell, and knowing when individuals need something, when the team needs something, and that kind of thing. But certainly developing some type of culture as a leader, and also developing a range of values that you stand by and continue to stand by no matter what, certainly helps you develop yourself as a leader.
So, what triggers to you that a coach is building a successful culture within their team? I mean, are there cues that you're looking for, things that stand out?
Well, I think probably I don't want to be have robots, but I think that a big trigger for me is when you start seeing players leading each other. So for me, trying to develop. So again, there's some key player qualities with US Soccer, and I'm just in this space right now, so these are things that come to mind. So some key player qualities that they have are taking initiative as one. Another big thing that I try and stand by is taking responsibility. And then another one, which is a more sports psychology thing, is being focused on the field. And that is about demonstrating a prerequisite number of behaviors as a player that then other players will see. So I think those are 3 attributes. There's 6 player qualities, but they're 3 of them. And those are 3 that I think I certainly try and talk to my players about all the time. And it's good to see when other players start to have conversations away from you that are not just about social aspects, but about things that, oh, hey, when I've got the ball here, I need you here. So I think that that would be one attribute where people are taking initiative. Another thing is, when you kind of don't need to start telling people to do certain things that you've probably had to tell people to do. We see in the classroom with our teachers, you've got rules and routines, I guess. And when players start to follow those routines, so we have a little warm up that we do, like a calisthenic warm up before games. And when coaches get to a stage where players can do that autonomously and are not needing your direction all the time to do some of those day in, day out things, I think that that is a signifying factor that you've developed some type of leadership. And again, it's not all these players have to do that because I told them what to do, but it's just the fact that they understand rules and routines and can kind of get those things going. But I think the ultimate thing is that if you see in your players the values that you have as a coach, I think that that's when you start to see the fact that people are living and breathing the type of culture that you're trying to set up. And it goes beyond then they're just kind of words on the wall. So like I say, for me, if players start taking initiative, if they're focused when they come to practice, when you say, right, it's time to get on, everyone's dialed in and ready to go. And then another thing is if people are taking personal responsibility, so they're helping each other out. If someone forgets something, they're picking it up. If people leave water bottles around, we clean up and we put them in the trash can. You see what I mean? Things like that. And I think that those are things that definitely are part of developing a strong team culture and bond. And then the last thing I would say is, I think, and this is a trick that I think people potentially miss. I'm not saying I'm any better, because sometimes, we all lose sight of it, is doing things, social activities outside of the kind of the sports space. So little get-togethers here and there, go and watch movies together, and that kind of thing. And then the final thing is having Don Hellison in physical education talks about this, having sort of that informal time before practice where you kind of talk to individuals, and then doing the same after practice, and keeping those open lines of communication, I think, are important between you and the players.
Speaking of that kind of innate hierarchy that happens between coaches and captains and players, how do you feel like that, like coaches can foster that kind of open communication channel? Because personally, I've been on a couple of teams that I can look back on and say that was terrible coaching because there was just a lack of communication.
Well, I mean, as coaches, we can make decisions, I guess, about what it is that we want to give up responsibility for, especially in the short term when we're starting to build the team and the culture or the group, because it might be a bunch of individuals coming to train with you as a coach. Like in a track and field example, you might have a training group, but it's all really a lot of individuals, which I know team sports are, but we're like, for me, I coach a team, so they are a team, but I have to also look after the individuals too. So I think that we need to be mindful a little bit of the individuals and making sure that we have space where we can have a multiplicity of ideas, right? Where we can, like in game-based coaching, when we talk about that, or in inquiry-based teaching and coaching, we can ask questions and get feedback. We can do think pair shares about certain things. And the irony for coaches is, like, I've got young players who are in like elementary/middle school, that these are things that teachers do with the kids at elementary school. And so using a range of cold calling techniques, think pair shares, open questions, and giving players opportunities to discuss, letting players, we do a small sided scrimmage sometimes, and I let them figure out where we're going to be playing in terms of tell them what the formation is, and then they put people in the positions. So giving up some responsibility to things that maybe will give the athletes a feeling of empowerment, but to you, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, that's still me being a bit coach centered, but the perception of the athletes is that, they're getting some buy-in. I ask the players a lot of the time, how are we doing in the practice? Like if there's a little drill or a game that we're playing, how are we doing on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being awesome, 1 being not so good. So then we sort of say, oh, we're a 6. So
Sorry.
Sorry. Excuse you. What makes this a 6? How can we make this a 7 or an 8? What do we need to be doing? And so we can talk a little bit about that type of thing and get them to sort of do that constant reflection on, right, am I doing the best that I can do? Could I do it, that little bit better? And I think the final thing is, a lot of thing we miss is maybe explaining why we're doing things for players. So if sometimes you explain why you're doing things rather than just going through the drills, I think that's where we develop this notion of understanding. And I think that the notion of understanding is key to developing and promoting a social moral environment where they see that a coach cares about them, and you might not be showing that you care about them as people per se, but you're showing that you care about them indirectly because you've got their needs at heart. Hey, this is something we need to work on. This is something you need to work on. You know, how are we going to do that? You know, or I've thought that this might be one way to do that. Let's work on it and see, right, what else do you think you need to be doing, and that kind of thing. So I think that, you know, for me, I'm always doing the Steve Hansen thing, trying to push people beyond what it is they think they can achieve. Because I think, like, I coach girls, especially, and this might be a gendered view coming from a male coach, but I do think sometimes, I mean, all people, I think we can only achieve so much. Whereas, again, you know, as a sports psychologist, people can always achieve something better. And, you know, it's just getting them in the right mindset to be able to achieve those things. So there's a few strategies there about, you know, the understanding of why, asking questions, as I said before, talking to people one-on-one, trying to sometimes have a focus for different players in different sessions, depending on where you're at, you know, building people up, especially if you've kind of had to have a little bit of a moment with somebody, you know, not always beating them down, but following up with positive commentary if you've had to be a little bit critical and things like that.
Speaking of that positive commentary, at what point in an athlete's development do you think that coaches should start teaching mental skills?
Well, mental skills kind of being maybe outside of the, you know, off the field kind of thing. It's a bit like coaches and using video and doing video sessions. So I've done a couple of little video sessions. I don't overdo it, but we've done a couple of team leadership meetings as well. And I've got 10-year-old kids. Well, they're all 10 now, and some are starting to become 11. So I think that that's, you know, kind of a good time to maybe be a little bit more overt about these types of things. We've done a little bit of mental skills through the setting of some goals, but a criticism of goal setting is that coaches set goals and never kind of keep players orientated towards those goals, right? So that's a bit of a problem, or can be a problem if you don't always continually come back to them. And hands up that I've been guilty of those types of things. But I think that certainly when they get to those upper elementary age groups, there's a little bit more cognitive capacity where that metacognition sort of kicking in, where doing some of that mental skill training is important. I think there's a implicit agenda with, say, like my coaching, where it is driven a little bit by this notion of, like I told you, those 3 player qualities. And there's a lot of an implicit agenda there where you're building kind of one of the 4 C's, which is character. And you're trying to do that by getting them to reflect on teachable moments. So we got beat 7-1 the other week, and it was 1-0 to the other team, 1-1, and then we went 2-1 down, and then we had half time and we chatted and whatever, and then we went 3-1 down and slid all the way down. We got beat 7-1, and it was a bad day. And we'd played a game earlier that day, but it was the other team's first game of the day, and that team is a one age group above us, so it was going to be a tough game anyway. So all of us were frustrated. We kind of got on each other's case a bit and things like that, but we have to use these types of things to be sort of teachable moments. So I think that my players have a bit, at that age, have some cognitive capacity to understand how we can use aspects like that to continue to build and grow, rather than take them as, you know, something we need to dwell on, right? The old Ken Leviser, the flush it thing. Well, let's flush it.
Yeah.
Then let's go back to training and work on some things that are going to help us move forward. So that's around probably about the age where, but it depends, right? Because we sort of do this in coaching. We say, oh, we can't do X with Y or whatever. So it's about thinking about mental skills and about how you're going to break that down, how you're going to communicate that in appropriate language for the group that you've got. And, you know, knowing your students again and knowing your players, you should be able to do that as a coach as you sort of move forward. But the fact that you would have that thought process to want to develop mental skills and or character and some of the off-field qualities is sometimes a trick that we miss because we're focused on the X's and O's.
And then when you do have, for example, a team that has just lost by the margin that yours did, and you pinpoint, okay, we're currently in a slump. How do you as a coach fix that, either as a team or individually?
Well, in this specific instance, I was somewhat fortunate. I did video record that particular game, so we were able to watch some of the clips about some of the goals we gave away. And whilst that may seem a bit negative, we also did look at, you know, some of the goals we'd scored that day. We'd beaten a team in the morning by a similar margin. So it was kind of like reminding them, we can do this. You know, there was some factors working against it, things like that. So video was one thing, you know, trying to reiterate the positive things that we're doing and what we've achieved in the past, and, you know, where we've come from to where we are now and that kind of thing, and just sort of reorientate expectations. And like I say, it was the second game of the day. It was cold and wet that particular day. It was our second game, their first. So there was, like I say, various factors. So, you know, trying to get an understanding of the context of that loss and where it's positioned in the respect of the broader world where we're living, that, well, it's only a game as well, and life goes on and all this kind of thing, and there's more severe things that are going to happen in life rather than losing a game of soccer 7-1. So I think, you know, trying to orientate around positive strategies and, you know, not things that still require work, but positive strategies in the sense of, hey, this is how we're going to move forward and things like that, and getting their thoughts on, hey, how did you feel? Why did you feel that way? Things like that. So those were some of the types of things that we would do. I mean, in the next tournament we went to, I mean, not that this really matters in youth sport, but I mean, we made the finals. So we, you know, we had some competitive games and, you know, 3-1, 3-2, a 1-1 tie, and then we lost the final 3-1. But we, you know, we stepped up and we, you know, we did a good job, and we had kind of a little bit of resilience. And we had some bad things that happened in the final because a couple of players got injured and things like that. But, you know, the players have an understanding of perspective, I guess, and where things fit, and hopefully, you know, the parents and myself as a coach do too. But I think we lose sight of that sometimes. There was a coach called Alan Launder. He was British, but he ended up living in Australia, and he has a book called Play Practice, and he uses the analogy of the swamp. And when you're in the swamp, it's hard to remember why you get into the swamp in the first place. And so that thing is a big thing for me, is you've got to remember why you get in the swamp and forget just trying to get out of it. But, you know, you've also got to remember how, you know, how you got in there in the first place, but also not dwell on why you got in there in the first place, but think about strategies about how you're going to get yourself out of the swamp.
So Zoom is cutting me off in 8.5 minutes. When it does do that, I will send you another Zoom link to continue this conversation. But if I just suddenly disappear, that's why.
Yeah, it's fine.
I don't know why it's doing this, but we're just going to keep going. We still have 8 minutes and 4 seconds on this Zoom link, and then I'll email you another one. It's weird. But kind of going off of what you were just talking about, fostering that self-image, that positive kind of self-quality, so things like self-worth, how do you, through the game, enhance that in your players?
I mean, again, tough question. And I wouldn't say that I've got all the answers, and I've probably had missteps along the way. And even this season, we all make mistakes. We all get tied to the emotional aspects of time of things because we either care about the players or, inadvertently we care about the results, because results do give. I think for me, I care more about a result because sometimes it shows the players the progress that they're making, if you know what I mean. I had a team one year where all we did was we won one game and tied one, and we lost the other kind of 13. And it's not a good, even though you do everything, it's just not a good place to be. And, it was because they were put in a league that was ostensibly too challenging for where they were at that current time, and in tournament brackets where they were, not able to be as competitive as they could have been. And so I think that finding the level, is important. But I think that playing some games and getting results is important, and them seeing that you win some, you lose some, and reflecting on, where we're going with that. And, I'd rather, a colleague of mine, Dr. Tom Turner, he talks about, well, you'd rather lose a game 3-2 or 4-2 or 3-1 rather than get thumped and win a game like by the margins that we talked about earlier, 7-1 and 8-2 or whatever. Because I think that these are games where you can keep the players in that zone of proximal development, as Vygotsky would say, where they know that they have to put in a little bit more effort to win the game. But even though they might do that, they might make some mistakes along the way, and therefore not kind of come out with a win when they should. But that's touch and go, and you might get a couple of bad refereeing decisions, or they might make a couple of individual mistakes, but that's part and parcel of learning and growing. And we don't always get what we want, even though we try our hardest. But we've got to, again, it goes back to that perspective, right, where we have to think about the perspective taking and saying, right, well, where is it that we're at now, and where is it we've got to? And there's a quote by Guardiola yesterday after the Man City lost, is, it's a John Dewey quote, well, we don't learn through experience, we learn by reflecting on experience. And so we have to go through that constant process, and hopefully that spirals up over a period of time where we can learn through the experiences we have and reflect on those, and then tell the players, this is what I'm doing to help us, this is what I need you to do. And hopefully by doing that we can continue to grow and develop and move forward. And again, part of that is communicating that to parents as well. This is where we're at, this was the context of this game. Yes, I understand we're all disappointed and frustrated, but we need to move on. This is how I'm doing it. This is what I would like you to do with your child as well, reinforce these points, and hopefully working together we can all kind of move forward. I don't know if I answered that question.
No, you did. And you were talking earlier about the influx of technology into coaching and how it can be both beneficial and detrimental. How do you see technology, like watching film, or if you're actually playing a game that's televised, instant replay, for example, changing the complexity of a game?
Yeah, I mean, with VAR, I guess you've got a broader impact because it is going to affect, and I think there's some studies that have shown it sort of affected players' behavior in terms of the types of things that they might do. Trying to get fouls from the opposition in a soccer context and things like that. But in tennis, it might be how often they appeal the ball being out or in, and they only get a certain amount of challenges. So there's a tactical aspect to that too. And it also has an impact from the broader perspective about the fan experience and spectator behavior and things like that. And there's obviously the impact on the referee. So we got to look at that at a micro and macro level and how it impacts all the stakeholders within. But in terms of technology and what we do, boots on the ground, day to day on the court or on the field, I think that, for a lot of youth sport coaches, particularly, there's probably not as heavy emphasis on technology because it's about making sure there's a connection with the player and that you build, as you say, a positive environment first. And then once you've got those things in place, you can, you like me, I've used video a couple of times this season, but it's used sparingly. And at times when we probably do have a little bit of a lull, or as you said, a slump, even though it's a slump, not a slump over a period of time, but like a one off or a couple of games where we're not really at the races. So I think that the judicious use of technology is really where you need it. The other thing is I think you can use technology to impact you and your coaching for myself. So it could be, there's a technology that we use where we put this belt on and it tells you how active the players are during a session. So that might give me a bit of feedback about how I need to redesign my session plans so that players are getting the type of activity that they might get during games in training, so that the level of intensity is there for portions of the session so that they're ready to play in the games. As well. So you could use technology in that way as well. So I think, using it sparingly and judiciously, and also communicating again why it's being used and why we feel it's important at the particular time that we're using it is probably the best way to do it. The other way I've used technology is sometimes, for an individual skill development, looking at, in soccer, it's kicking the ball. It could be in tennis, serving. It could be about running mechanics in a track and field context, or, so I think that, but the key thing is trying to get the players involved in the process is important, and them understanding again why it's important that it's used.
Okay, so we are less than a minute.
Exactly, which is why I tried to finish.
Can you see the timer on your end?
Yeah, it says less than a minute. I
Okay,
don't know
yeah.
whether it just keeps going
Yeah,
because
I'm not sure.
it's just me and you.
Right.
So
I've never
usually,
had this happen with a 1v1 Zoom.
Mhm.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm not going to ask any more questions because you're not going to have time to answer. So we're just